The person chasing happiness is like a child trying to catch their own shadow. The faster they run, the faster the shadow flees. But what happens when they stop running? You know, there's something absolutely fascinating happening in our world right now. Everywhere you look, people are desperately pursuing happiness. Self-help books promise it in 10 easy steps. Therapists offer it through careful analysis. Gurus sell it in weekend retreats. And yet, despite all this chasing, despite all this effort, despite all this trying, people seem more anxious, more restless, more fundamentally dissatisfied than ever before. What if I told you that this isn't a coincidence? What if the very act of pursuing happiness is precisely what's keeping you from it? What if your desperate attempts to feel good are the exact mechanism creating your suffering? Now, I'm not suggesting we become miserable pessimists who reject all joy. That would be missing the point entirely. And what I'm pointing toward is something far more subtle and far more revolutionary. The recognition that happiness isn't something you can chase, capture, or achieve. It's something you can only discover when you stop running after it. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time you felt genuinely, effortlessly happy? I'll bet it wasn't when you were trying to be happy. I'll bet it was when you were completely absorbed in something else. Playing with a child, perhaps. Lost in a beautiful piece of music. Walking in nature without any agenda. Making love without thinking about performance. These moments of real happiness have one thing in common. You weren't trying to be happy. This is the first clue to understanding what's really going on. Happiness, it seems, is what emerges when we're not focused on happiness. It's like sleep. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more elusive it becomes. But when you stop trying, when you simply lie there without agenda, sleep comes naturally. But why does trying to be happy make us unhappy? Let me explain what's actually happening in your mind when you make happiness a goal. The moment you decide you want to be happy, you've created a fundamental split in your experience. There's the you who is not happy now, and there's the imaginary future you who will be happy when certain conditions are met. When I get that promotion, when I find the right relationship, when I lose weight, when I buy that house, then I'll be happy. Do you see the trap? You've just told yourself that right now, in this moment, you're not good enough. The present moment becomes a stepping stone to some imaginary future state. You're essentially saying, this moment is inadequate. Real life will begin when I'm happy. And so you live in constant rejection of what is, in favor of what might be. But here's what's really insidious about this pattern. The future you're chasing doesn't exist. When you finally get that promotion, find that relationship, lose that weight, buy that house, you'll find that happiness is still somewhere else, in the next goal, the next achievement, the next acquisition. The goalposts keep moving because the fundamental problem was never about external circumstances. It was about your relationship to this moment right now. Let me tell you about a man I once knew who spent his entire life chasing happiness. He worked 60-hour weeks to afford the car that would make him happy. He got the car, felt good for about 2 weeks, then decided he needed a bigger house. He got the house, felt satisfied for a month, then decided he needed a more prestigious job. He climbed the corporate ladder, achieved everything he thought he wanted, and found himself at 55, sitting in his beautiful home, driving his expensive car, wondering why he felt so empty. What had happened? He had spent decades postponing his life, always believing that happiness was just around the corner. He had trained himself to be dissatisfied with the present moment. He had become an expert at rejecting what is in favor of what might be. And this habit, this constant reaching for something else, had become so ingrained that even when he achieved his goals, he couldn't rest in them. His mind immediately started reaching for the next thing. This is what I call the happiness treadmill. You're always running, but you never actually get anywhere because you're running on a moving belt. The faster you run, the faster the belt moves. The harder you try to reach happiness, the further away it seems to get. Now, you might be thinking, but surely wanting to be happy is natural. Surely there's nothing wrong with trying to improve my life. And you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with preferring pleasure to pain, success to failure, health to sickness. The problem isn't with preferences. The problem is with making your happiness dependent on your preferences being fulfilled. When you make happiness conditional, when you say, I'll be happy when, you've essentially made yourself a hostage to circumstances beyond your control. You've given your peace of mind to the stock market, to other people's opinions, to your body's changing condition, to the weather, to politics, to a million variables that you cannot control. But what if happiness isn't conditional at all? What if it's not something you achieve, but something you uncover? What if it's not a feeling you create, but a deeper contentment that's always available when you stop disturbing it with your desperate attempts to feel better? This is where it gets really interesting. Underneath all your seeking, underneath all your wanting and trying and efforting, there's something that's already at peace. There's an awareness that watches all your emotions come and go without being disturbed by them. There's a stillness that remains calm whether you're experiencing pleasure or pain, success or failure, excitement or boredom. Most people never discover this deeper contentment because they're too busy trying to feel good. They're so focused on changing their emotional state that they never notice the awareness in which all emotional states arise and dissolve. It's like being so fascinated by the waves on the surface of the ocean that you never discover the vast, still depths beneath. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Have you ever been in physical pain, perhaps with a headache or a sore back, and noticed that even though the pain is uncomfortable, there's something in you that's not actually suffering? There's an awareness that can observe the pain without being overwhelmed by it. That awareness doesn't have a headache. It simply notices that a headache is occurring. The same thing happens with emotional pain. When you're sad or anxious or angry, there's something in you that can observe these feelings without being completely identified with them. That observer doesn't get sad or anxious or angry. It simply notices that sadness or anxiety or anger is arising in the field of awareness. This observer, this witnessing consciousness is what you really are, and it's never not at peace. It doesn't need to be happy because it's not separate from whatever is happening. It doesn't reject sadness because sadness is just another movement in consciousness, like clouds moving across the sky. When you discover this deeper identity, this witnessing awareness, something miraculous happens. You stop needing to feel good all the time. You can let yourself feel whatever you're feeling without the extra layer of suffering that comes from resisting it. You can be sad without being sad about being sad. You can be anxious without being anxious about your anxiety. You can be in pain without telling yourself stories about what the pain means. And in this allowing, in this non-resistance, something unexpected emerges. Not happiness as an emotion, but happiness as your natural state. Not the temporary high of getting what you want, but the steady contentment of not needing anything to be different than it is. This is what the ancient wisdom traditions have always pointed toward. Not a state you achieve through effort, but your original nature that becomes apparent when you stop covering it up with your seeking. It's what's sometimes called uncaused joy, a contentment that doesn't depend on circumstances. But how do you access this? How do you stop chasing happiness and start resting in your natural contentment? The first step is to notice what you're doing when you try to be happy. Really observe it. Watch how your mind constantly evaluates your current state and finds it lacking. Notice how you're always leaning into the future, always reaching for something else. The next time you catch yourself thinking, I'll be happy when, stop and ask yourself, who is it that would be happy? Who is it that's not happy now? Don't answer intellectually. Actually look. Is there really someone there who lacks happiness, or is there just a thought claiming that happiness is missing? You'll discover something remarkable. The one who seeks happiness can never be found. There are thoughts about needing to be happy. There are feelings of dissatisfaction. But when you look for the actual entity who is supposedly unhappy, you'll find nothing, just awareness itself, just consciousness experiencing whatever is arising in this moment. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent to life. It means you stop making your well-being dependent on life conforming to your preferences. You can still prefer health to sickness, wealth to poverty, success to failure, but you don't need these things to be at peace. Your contentment doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from not being in conflict with what is. When you truly understand this, when you really see that happiness is not something you can pursue, but something you already are, your whole approach to living changes. You stop postponing your life until conditions improve. You stop treating the present moment as a problem to be solved. You start living from presence instead of from seeking. This doesn't mean you stop setting goals or working toward things you want. It means you do these things from a place of wholeness rather than from a sense of lack. You work toward your goals not because you need them to be happy, but because it's simply what's appearing to happen in this moment. You enjoy the process rather than fixating on the outcome. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop chasing happiness, when you stop making it a goal, it starts showing up everywhere. Not as a feeling you have to maintain, but as the natural expression of consciousness when it's not in conflict with itself. You start noticing joy in the most ordinary moments. The taste of your morning coffee, the feeling of warm water in the shower, the sound of birds outside your window. These aren't peak experiences you have to work for. They're the natural appreciation that emerges when you're not constantly evaluating whether your experience is good enough. When you stop grading your moments, you start enjoying them. There's a Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The activities remain the same. What changes is your relationship to them. You're no longer chopping wood to get somewhere else. You're simply chopping wood. And in that simplicity, in that presence, there's a contentment that no amount of seeking could ever produce. So what if you experimented with this? What if for just one day you stopped trying to be happy? What if you allowed yourself to feel whatever you're feeling without trying to change it or fix it or improve it? What if you stopped evaluating your emotional state and just let it be? You might discover that the unhappiness you've been trying to escape is not as solid as you thought. You might find that emotions are more like weather. They come and go by themselves when you stop fighting them. You might notice that underneath all the changing states, there's something that never changes, something that's always at rest. This isn't a technique to practice or a state to achieve. It's a recognition of what's already true. You are not someone who needs to become happy. You are the space in which happiness and unhappiness both arise and dissolve. You are not the seeker. You are what the seeker is seeking. The child chasing their shadow eventually gets tired and sits down to rest. And in that moment of stillness, they discover something wonderful. The shadow wasn't separate from them at all. It was always connected, always there, never actually running away. The chase was unnecessary. The connection was never broken. In the same way, when you stop running after happiness, you discover that you were never actually separated from it. The very consciousness that was seeking happiness is happiness itself. The peace you were trying to achieve is the peace that you are. The love you were trying to find is the love that's looking. This is the deepest joke, the cosmic humor that spiritual teachers have been laughing about for thousands of years. You are what you seek. You always have been. The only thing that was ever missing was the recognition of this simple, obvious truth. So stop running, stop chasing your shadow. Rest in what you are and let life happen through you rather than to you. This is not resignation. This is recognition. This is not giving up. This is waking up to the happiness that was never actually absent, just temporarily overlooked in all your earnest seeking. Now let me share with you exactly how this plays out in everyday life, because understanding this intellectually is one thing, but seeing it in action is quite another. Think about the last time you were genuinely happy. I mean, really happy, not just momentarily pleased or temporarily satisfied, but deeply content. What was happening? Were you thinking about how to be happier? Were you working on yourself, trying to improve your emotional state, following some happiness strategy? I doubt it. You were probably completely absorbed in what was happening. Maybe you were playing with a dog, and the dog's pure joy was so infectious that you forgot to monitor your own emotional state. Maybe you were cooking a meal for someone you loved, completely focused on the task, hands busy, mind quiet. Maybe you were walking somewhere beautiful, and the beauty was so overwhelming that for a moment the constant commentary in your head simply stopped. These moments have something in common. Your attention wasn't on yourself. You weren't self-conscious about your happiness level. You weren't evaluating your experience. You were simply present, fully engaged with what was happening, without any agenda to feel differently than you did. This gives us a crucial clue about the nature of happiness. Real happiness seems to emerge when the self-focused mind relaxes. When you're not thinking about yourself, not monitoring your emotional state, not trying to improve your experience, something natural and effortless arises. But the moment you notice this happiness and think, oh good, I'm happy. How can I keep this going? How can I make this last? In that very moment, you've stepped back into the seeking mind, and the effortless quality disappears. You've turned happiness into an object to be grasped, and in doing so, you've lost the very thing you were trying to preserve. It's like trying to catch a soap bubble. The harder you grasp, the more likely it is to pop. But if you simply hold out your hand and let it land gently, it might rest there for a moment in all its iridescent beauty. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize the importance of letting go, of non-attachment, of surrender. They're not asking you to become passive or indifferent. They're pointing toward the recognition that happiness is not something you do, but something you are when you stop doing so much. Let me give you another example. Have you ever been listening to music and suddenly found yourself completely absorbed in the sound? In those moments, where is the person who wants to be happy? There's just music happening, just consciousness experiencing itself as sound. This is your natural state when you're not interfering with it. The interference comes when you think, this is nice. I wish I felt this good all the time. How can I feel this way more often? Just like that, you're back in the seeking mind, treating happiness as something separate that you need to acquire. What if happiness isn't a feeling at all? What if contentment is what remains when you stop stirring up dissatisfaction with constant mental activity? Think of muddy water. All you need to do is stop stirring it. The mud settles by itself and clarity emerges naturally. Your mind works the same way. Constantly thinking about how to be happier is like stirring the mud. But when you stop the mental activity around improving your state, something remarkable happens. The turbulence settles and your natural contentment becomes apparent. This doesn't mean you become a passive, emotionless zombie. Emotions continue to arise, preferences continue to exist, life continues to have its ups and downs. But there's something in you that remains untouched by these fluctuations, something that's at peace whether you're experiencing pleasure or pain, whether things are going your way or not. Here's another way to understand this. Imagine watching a movie. If you're completely absorbed, you feel scared during scary parts and happy during happy parts. So you're identified with the characters. But there's also a part of you that knows you're just watching a movie. That part remains calm, regardless of what's happening in the story. Your life is like that movie, and you are both the character and the awareness watching the story unfold. The seeking mind keeps you identified with the character, believing your peace depends on how the story turns out. But your deeper identity knows that no matter what happens in the story, Awareness remains at peace. This is why trying to be happy is fundamentally backwards. You're trying to fix something that isn't actually broken. You're trying to find something you already have. You're trying to become something you already are. It's like a fish searching for water while swimming in the ocean. The very medium that supports the fish's existence is what it thinks it lacks. The fish doesn't need to find water. It needs to recognize that it's already immersed in it, surrounded by it, made of it. You don't need to find happiness. You need to recognize that you're already immersed in consciousness, surrounded by awareness, made of the very stuff that peace is made of. The seeking keeps you focused on the surface waves while missing the vast ocean of stillness beneath. So, how do you stop seeking? Simply notice what seeking feels like in your body and mind. Notice the tension, the sense that something is missing. Don't try to stop seeking. That would just be more seeking. Simply observe it with curiosity. Experiment with resting in whatever you're experiencing without trying to change it. If you're sad, can you be sad without being sad about being sad? This isn't about becoming comfortable with suffering. It's about recognizing that resistance creates more suffering than the original feeling. When you stop fighting your experience, something extraordinary happens. You discover that emotions are much more fluid than you thought. They arise, they intensify, they dissolve, all by themselves, without your management. And underneath their coming and going, there's something constant, something that never changes. That something is what you are, not the temporary emotional states, not the thoughts that come and go, not the circumstances that fluctuate, but the aware presence in which all of these appear and disappear. This aware presence doesn't need to be happy because it's not separate from whatever is arising. It's complete in itself, whole in itself, at peace with itself. And yet this presence is not static or lifeless. It's vibrantly alive, intimately present, capable of the full range of human experience. The shadow was never running away. You were just running towards something you already had. And when you finally stop, when you finally rest, you discover that what you've been looking for was looking through your eyes all along. The happiness you've been chasing was the very consciousness doing the chasing.